The latest news is that the building inspector is coming at 10 o'clock tomorrow morning, and we are pouring concrete at 11 o'clock. Yeah. So at least some of us are really excited about this. I don't know about all of you, but some of us here are really excited about it. So tomorrow morning, because we have our class with Jeffrey Hopkins, then there will be meditation from 9 until 10:15 that Zopa will lead. Then they're supposed to start setting up for the pour at about 10:30. And our class with Jeffrey usually goes till about 10:30. And then I thought we would kind of see what happens. Yeah. And see, maybe we come here. We'll also be taking precepts. So we usually start lunch early at 11:45 on precept day. So it could be that we come and have a short talk from like 11 until 11:30 and then watch the concrete for 15 minutes and then eat lunch. It could be something like that. We'll kind of play it by ear. Does that sound? Yeah?
Yeah, I might have to watch the concrete though.
Yeah, okay. I know, I'm going to be like this, because for some of us, this building has been on our minds for quite a number of years. And, we've put a lot of effort into it, and driving in to talk to the architect and back and talk to the construction guys. And Venerable Tarpa knows every engineer in the county almost. And she's almost at the point of becoming an engineer herself. No, but you really look and understand everything they're talking about. Yeah, I just ask how much does it cost. You ask everything else. Yeah. So so it's kind of exciting for us. Some of you I thought maybe I should explain a little bit about the building. Like I said on the first day, that the building is primarily for the guests, because for the community we don't need such a big kitchen and dining room and so on. But we're hoping that the community will grow and the number of guests will grow too, because like I said before, this is really a place for everybody, and a place where future generations, for thousands of years, where people can come and meet the Buddha's teachings and practice them. We decided to start building this year, even though we don't have all the money for the building, for a few reasons. One was it's our way of helping the economy, and giving people jobs. There's a lot of people who are going to have jobs because this is a $2 million project. Yeah, so it's our way of helping. And also just financially, with the interest rates the way they are, it doesn't make any sense to save the money for next year. So we decided, let's just make a go for it and start the construction, and then pray. Yeah, right. So that's the reason for the 21 million Mani Padme Hungs. Okay. So slowly we hope the building will grow. If everything goes well, it should be done in a year, hopefully. It might take longer. I don't know where we are with the architect, with Tim.
In what regard?
Oh, has it? Huh? Yeah.
Rick will be here tomorrow, so I've asked him to talk to George, and get George talk to him, and try to get it worked out.
Yeah, let's get the show on the road. Yeah. This is what I do. I ask, how much does it cost? And then I say, let's get the show on the, I have two standard phrases. Okay. Yeah.
I think the part that's so amazing is that when Venerable first bought this place, one of the things that she found out is that it didn't have any planning and zoning. So we could do a lot of the things that we're doing, that if it had a planning and zoning, we would have to conjure up something, I don't know. But because they haven't, they don't know what to do with us. So they're on a very steep learning curve on what to do with a monastery that's not a commercial restaurant, or not a school, or not a residence. So there's benefits of not having that, and then there's also this learning curve of, how to really do this in a way that makes everybody happy. So I think we've been mutually learning from each other on how best to build safely, and they're learning a whole bunch, I think.
Yeah, and we might be some of the few people in the county who actually go in to the office and get a permit and say, please help us, because this is a county, that's quite libertarian, So a lot of people just kind of go and do what they want. But we actually go in and say, this is what we want to do, can you help us? And like, oh boy. Yeah. Okay, so that's the plan until it changes. Okay, so I think we've talked enough, about happiness and the causes of happiness, at least to get us going on thinking about what it is we're wishing for sentient beings, and particularly the kind of Dharma happiness that we're wishing them. And in order for them to have happiness that comes from practice, they need all the conditions to practice, and some of those are external conditions, and some of them are internal conditions, your own mental states of mind. Okay, so it's good to really contemplate this when we're doing a meditation on love. Otherwise it's very easy for us to fall into thinking, oh, we wish them happiness, so we want them all to have a new refrigerator and a new car, and we just think about worldly happiness. And it's very important that we think beyond worldly happiness, for others as well as for ourselves. And then similarly, when we generate compassion, which is the wish for beings to be free of suffering and the causes of suffering, then we have to think about what suffering is and what its causes are. Now, actually, the word suffering is a wrong translation. So it's much better to use the word dukkha, which is the Pali Sanskrit word, which has commonly been translated as suffering, but that translation is very, very misleading. Because when we hear suffering, we think of outright physical and mental pain. And while that is included in the word dukkha, dukkha also has a much, much broader meaning than that. Okay? And if in our mind we only think the ouch kind of suffering, then our meditation on compassion is going to be extremely limited. And we'll never actually be able to generate great compassion. Because great compassion has to understand all the kinds of dukkha and wish sentient beings to be free from it. Okay, so there's 3 different types of dukkha. The first one is the dukkha of suffering, the ouch kind of suffering, mental and physical pain. Yeah, so that's included in the broad category of dukkha. And human beings, as well as animals, as well as any kind of life form, don't want that. Everybody can recognize that as something that's not wanted. Okay. But dukkha, like I said, doesn't mean just suffering. It actually means unsatisfactory conditions or unsatisfactory circumstances. So there's more things in our life that are unsatisfactory besides just physical and mental pain. Another thing, a second kind of dukkha, is what they call the dukkha of change. And what this means is that what we call happiness doesn't last and is actually by nature something that is unsatisfactory. Okay? Because as we spoke of the other day, whenever we get something, a worldly kind of happiness, it isn't stable. It doesn't last. It gets broken. It ends. It gets trampled on. It doesn't last in any kind of way. And we can see this all throughout our lives, because we've had a lot of worldly happiness in our life. But where is it now? Yeah, we may have scrapbooks full of photos of our worldly happiness. We may have incredible memories of different things. But all that happiness that we've experienced, worldly happiness, is like last night's dream. Where is last night's dream when you wake up? It's gone, isn't it? Completely gone, like a dream. It is a dream. And so all the happiness we've experienced in the past, it's nice, but it's kind of like a dream, isn't it? Where is it right now? There's nothing. Just some kind of memory. That's it. Yeah? So that is unsatisfactory, isn't it? And moreover, that kind of worldly happiness, the object that gives us the worldly happiness, or the situation that gives us the worldly happiness, if it were true happiness, the more we had it, or the more we did that activity, the happier we would be. But all we have to do is look at our own experience and imagine anything that brought us happiness and doing that activity 24/7. And ask ourselves, is that happiness now? Okay. So we think, having a good meal is happiness. But if you ate, and it's happiness when you're hungry, but you reach a point where the suffering of being hungry has gone down, but the suffering of getting too full has gone up. And there's a tipping point after which, if you continue eating, actually your outright suffering is increasing, not decreasing. Okay? So if eating were, good food were true happiness, the more we ate, the happier we would be. But that's not what happens. At a certain point, eating becomes outright painful if we keep doing it. Okay? So think of something else you really like, lying on the beach. When you go sit and lie on the beach, or maybe you go surfing, or whatever you're doing on the beach, we call that fun. It's vacation, isn't it? It's fun. But imagine that you keep lying on the beach, hour after hour after hour. Or you keep surfing or swimming hour after hour after hour. What happens? It's like, get me inside. I'm tired of doing this. It's too hot, I'm getting sunburned, or I'm exhausted from swimming so much. So that very thing that appeared to be in the nature of happiness is deceptive, because the more we do it, the happiness doesn't continue. It turns into outright difficulty. Okay. In our society, sex is promoted as the highest happiness. Okay. So you have sex. Then you have it again, and again, and again, and again. And you never get out of bed. You're having sex again, and again, and again, and again. What do you think's going to happen? Yeah? It's not going to be happiness, is it? You're going to be exhausted. You're going to be bored. Won't you?
Yeah.
After a while, bored, tired. It's like, oh, again? Yeah. So if it were in its very nature happiness, then the more you had it, the happier you would be. But that's not, in fact, what happens. After a while, it's like, leave me alone. I want to do something else. Or somebody you're really attached to. A family member, maybe you have some kind of emotional attachment to a child or a parent or a friend or whatever, and you feel, oh, this person's so important in my life, I don't want to be separated from them, they're so meaningful to me. Then imagine you're with that person 24/7. Yeah? And then the next day 24/7. And the next day 24/7. And then what happens? Get out of here! It's true, isn't it? Do you want to be chained to some other person all the time? So what appeared to be happiness at the beginning, if we keep doing it, becomes painful or distressful. So that shows that it's not true happiness. Because true happiness, the more you do it, it's going to simply increase, or at least remain at the same level. But this actually decreases. So the dukkha of change, is this changeable changeable dukkha. Well, I'm sorry. The dukkha of change is worldly happiness, and but only some people, some beings realize it or recognize it as being dukkha. Okay? Most of the people on the planet think it's actual happiness. Yeah? The people who realize it isn't happiness are people who are following a spiritual path. Because people who are following a spiritual path are looking for something that goes beyond the happiness of this life. Because they recognize the happiness of just this life is something limited. So this could be people from any religion. Yeah? Most religions have people who are just saying, this worldly happiness isn't cutting it. There's got to be something more. Mm-hmm. Okay? So these are people from any kind of religion who are really looking for something more to life than, this kind of ephemeral happiness. Then the third kind of dukkha is the most difficult to realize. Like I said, the first kind, animals, human beings realize. The second kind, only people on a spiritual path. The third kind is more difficult to realize. Okay? And very few people on a spiritual path actually realize that this is dukkha. And this third kind of dukkha is called the pervasive dukkha of conditioning. The pervasive dukkha of conditioning. And what it means is that our five aggregates, in other words, our form, our body, and then our four mental aggregates, feeling, discrimination, volitional factors, and consciousnesses. Those four are our mind. That our five aggregates are conditioned by ignorance, conditioned by afflictions, conditioned by karma, and thus dukkha pervades them. So it's the pervasive dukkha of conditioning. So our aggregates, our body and mind, are conditioned by ignorance. Why? By ignorance, by afflictions, and by karma. So why do we have this body and mind to start with? Have you ever wondered that? Why were you born into a body like this that has the nature of getting old, sick, and dying? Why did you get born in this kind of thing to start with? Did you ever wonder that? Why was I born me? Why was I born with this body? Okay? So this is because of a fundamental ignorance on our own part, that we not only don't see the nature of reality, but we apprehend the opposite of the nature of reality. So our mind is really confused, okay? And what's even worse is we hardly ever realize that how confused and ignorant our mind is. We think that we're seeing things as they truly are. But as soon as we start to examine our perceptions and conceptions, we begin to see that we aren't really seeing things as they truly are. That we're actually apprehending them in the opposite way from how they actually exist. Okay? So let's just start on a gross level. Okay? Things that are changing moment by moment, that have the nature of impermanence, we tend to think as permanent. When somebody dies, are you usually surprised? Even if it's somebody who's old or who are dying, on the day they die, are you usually surprised? It's like, yeah, I know they're dying, but I didn't think it would happen today. Yeah. So even this gross kind of suffering of death, we really don't think it's going to happen. We know it's going to happen, but we don't really feel that it's going to happen. We think that somehow things are everlasting and fixed, and they're not, changing moment by moment. Okay. So even on this level, this wrong conception brings us a lot of misery, because you know how freaked out we get when situations change and when plans change and when things don't go the way we want. We get pretty upset, or we get anxious or whatever. Why? Why do we get upset or anxious when what we expected to happen doesn't happen? It's because our mind, at some level, is grasping at things as permanent. We're not thinking they're going to change. We're thinking, okay, the plan is like this, or this thing is like this person is like this. It's always going to be like that. And then it changes, and we're like, oh my goodness, what happened here? This wasn't supposed to happen. Yeah, this building wasn't supposed to fall down. Yeah, this building wasn't supposed to catch on fire. This person wasn't supposed to die. Yeah, this car accident wasn't supposed to happen. All these things that happen, we're shocked because we think that thing, because our mind is holding on to things being permanent and predictable, and they're not. Okay? What we're grasping at is permanence in this case, okay? We're grasping things that are impermanent by nature to be permanent. Yeah. We also grasp things like we were just talking before, things that have the nature of dukkha. We grasp them as happiness. Okay? Things that have the nature of being foul, we grasp as clean and beautiful. For example, our body. Yeah. Are we willing to admit that our body is something foul. You know, there's a whole big trend in our society to deny this. You know, the body is beautiful. And we put so much energy into making the body more beautiful and to hiding and covering up its foulness. We wash it, we put scents on it, you know, to cover the smell. We have to completely clean it because every single orifice of our body gives off something that's really rather repugnant. It's true, isn't it? Yeah, bad breath and snot and eye stuff and earwax and, you know, pee and poo and sweat and, you know, everything that comes out of this body. It isn't particularly nice. But yet when we look at the body, we think, wow, so beautiful. Don't we? We think that way about our own body, and when we look at other people's bodies, I mean, this is the basis of sexual attraction, isn't it? Wow, look. You know? It's true, isn't it? Isn't it? Yeah? And so, I remember one time, there was one young woman who came up with her aunt here. She was about 14, 15 at the time, and she was boy crazy, you know, as teenage girls are at 14 and 15, completely boy crazy. So we took her we were going into Coeur d'Alene to one of the Dharma classes, and we stopped to have a picnic. Who was with me that day? You were? Okay, so we stopped to have a picnic. So we're eating, and then very nearby, there's a group of boys who are playing soccer. I think they're playing soccer or basketball or, you know, something like that.
They were shirtless with cute shorts on.
Yeah?
That's what she was looking at.
Yeah. So there she was, checking out all these dudes, and, you know, oh, this one's good looking, and that one's good looking, and, you know, it's like, no, eat your sandwich. No. Okay. And then I said to her, you know, imagine what they're going to look like when they're 80 years old. And her jaw dropped, and she was like, oh my goodness. And I said, you know, it's reality, isn't it? They're not going to be 16, 17, 18 all the time. Sometime they're going to be 80. What are they going to look like when they're 80? Yeah? What are they going to be like when they're 80? She was really flabbergasted. You know, I don't know how long that stuck, but for at least for a while, you know, she was like shocked. But as we all are, you know, when we think, what is that person who appears so attractive now? What are they going to look like in a few decades? You know, we still imagine we're going to look young. Yeah, right? We don't get gray hair. It's other people, and we don't get wrinkles, and, you know, we don't get stooped over, and we don't, you know, age. It's, yeah. So we're still going to be young and, you know, sexy. But what about those guys? You know, what are they going to look like when they're that old? Okay, are they still going to be so attractive? And even before they get that old, you know, when you live with somebody, is their body always attractive? No, when you live in close contact with somebody, you know what comes out of their body. And you see their body in all sorts of different situations. And it's not always gorgeous, is it? Yeah? Okay, but so that's another misconception, seeing what is foul as beautiful. And then a fourth misconception is seeing what doesn't have some kind of essential nature or existence from its own side, or objective existence. Seeing something that lacks that way of existing as being objective, and existing in its own right, independent of everything else. And that's the deepest kind of misconception that we have. Because we look, we open our eyes, we see things, we think what we see exists just the way it appears to us. How does it appear to us? It's out there. Doesn't it appear to you? Out there. And however I see it is actually what it is. Isn't that how things appear to you? Yeah? You look at something, this is a package of tissue from its own side. Somebody else is a jerk from their own side. Yeah? We think that however something appears to us is what it actually is. But as we've been discussing, even on a very gross level, somebody might appear to us to be a jerk, but they're not really a jerk from their own side. It's our mind that put them in the enemy category. We made them into the jerk. They're not that way from their own side. Somebody else who appears to be, fantastic from their own side is not. We're the ones who looked at them and put them in the friend category because we elaborated on their good qualities. Okay? So even in a gross way like that, we can see that we're not seeing things accurately. And then also just in terms of what things are, we think they have a nature inside of them that makes them what they are so that they can't really be anything else. We don't realize that how things exist depends on our mind. That our mind conceives of things and labels them. That things exist in relationship to our minds. We don't see that at all. We think everything is objective out there. Okay? So this is, a incorrect way of seeing things. And it brings us a lot of problems. Because we think we're seeing reality and we're not. And we make decisions based on thinking we're seeing reality when we're not. Okay? So we get involved in attachment, in anger, in jealousy, in resentment, all sorts of really uncomfortable emotions. Because we think that we're seeing reality out there, and we think that our emotional reaction to them is the only possible way we can react to those things. As we were talking like a few days ago, you see somebody and you just go, oh, I don't like them. As if, you have no other choice but to feel that way. Because from their side, they're unlikable. That's a total hallucination on our part. 100% hallucination. Okay? But we never doubt how things appear to us. Okay? So this ignorance that doesn't even question this gets us in a lot of trouble. And it's under the influence of this ignorance, as well as the mental afflictions, attachment, anger, and so forth, that come from it, as well as from the actions, the karma that we do motivated by those afflictions. All of these are what make us take rebirth in a body like this. And the thing is, once you're born in a body like this, the only thing you have to do is die. Everything else is optional. We always say, but I have to do this and I have to do that. We don't have to do any of it. It's all optional. It really is all optional. The only thing we have to do that we don't have any choice about is dying at some point or another. Everything else that we tell ourselves we have to do, actually we're choosing to do. This can sometimes be a little bit uncomfortable. Actually, a lot uncomfortable. Yeah, because so many of our excuses for not practicing Dharma are, but I have to do X, Y, and Z. I have to go to work. You don't have to go to work. Nobody's holding a gun to your head. You're choosing to go to work. I have to go pick up the kids. No, you're choosing to pick up the kids. I have to go to this party. Otherwise people are going to think I'm unfriendly. No, you're choosing to go to that party. Okay? I can't go to retreat because, I've got to go to this wedding. No, you're choosing to go to the wedding. So it's very interesting to really look at our mind, and whenever we hear ourselves saying, but I have to stop and ask ourselves, do I have to? Or am I choosing to? And it can be quite uncomfortable to actually admit, no, I am choosing to do these things. Yeah, because then we, the basis for our excuses go away. Yeah, but there's also something really refreshing about confronting that and saying, no, I'm choosing to. Because it gets us to be honest, and it gets us to really think about, well, what am I doing? What am I choosing to do? Okay? Yeah. So aging, sickness, death, those things are what we have to do. Yeah. Because once we have a body like this, that's the nature of this body. But everything else actually is optional. Yeah. Of course, there may be different payoffs of doing one thing and not another, or there may be different disadvantages of doing one thing and not another. But we're making those choices. Yeah. The world isn't making us do those things. We don't have to do them. Okay? So, this misperception that we have, that causes us to be born in a body that by nature gets old and sick and dies, is the root of all of our dukkha. And that's why we're trying to generate the wisdom that knows reality, because it sees things in the exact opposite way from the way this ignorance and all these misconceptions see things. And so the wisdom is able to actually overpower, eradicate the ignorance. Okay? So just this fact that our whole body and mind is conditioned by ignorance, afflictions, and karma, this is the pervasive dukkha of conditioning. And this is the subtlest level of dukkha and the most difficult to recognize. Yeah. We might, like I said, everybody recognizes outright physical pain. We might sometimes recognize what we call happiness as unsatisfactory. But to really see that the very nature of our existence in this body is unsatisfactory, and that there's no other way out of it except to generate wisdom. In other words, suicide is not an option. It doesn't stop this cycle. It only perpetuates it. There's one young man who's in prison that I correspond with. Actually, he's not so young now. He's in his mid-30s. But he was 16 when he was imprisoned. And for murder. Tried as an adult, given life without parole. And why am I telling you this story? What was it? Oh, yes. So James was, clearly at first depressed, to be at age 16 given a sentence of life without parole. And he told me, that for a while he was considering suicide. But then he realized, when he first met the Dharma and heard this discussion of rebirth, it really made sense to him. And he said once he realized that rebirth exists and he was going to get reborn, then suicide stopped being an option. Because he saw that it didn't stop the suffering. Yeah. So then he knew the only option was to work with his own mind and do something with his life. Yeah. So that really started invigorating him to do some very serious change. And if I can go off on a tangent for a minute, there was a Supreme Court case recently that said that they have to review the cases of young people who were tried as adults and given life without parole. Yeah, and they have to actually, see if they could be paroled. So James had been working very hard advocating for this before it was passed. And in thinking that he might one day get paroled after spending over half his life in prison, although he's only like 30-something. So he started learning computer stuff. And he's a total computer whiz. In his maximum security prison, he devised a television network system that can broadcast educational programs into the cells and into the common areas all throughout the prison so that other inmates can learn. Yeah. I mean, it's just incredible what he's done, because he realized, I might get out one day, and I don't want to be one of those people who come back in. I want to be able to get a job. Yeah? And I always think if he gets out, our computer problems will be solved. Because really, he's quite a whiz. He's quite remarkable with this stuff. I mean, he learned computer programming in prison? Yeah? Quite an amazing person. So, anyway, this kind of dukkha that is just having a body and a mind, not just the body, but also the mind, under the influence of ignorance, afflictions, and karma. So when we're wishing sentient beings, even though the verse says to be free of suffering and its causes, don't think suffering, think dukkha. Because this is one way that I've noticed so many people get very limited in their Dharma practice. When they hear the word suffering, they just think of outright physical suffering. And may all sentient beings be free of suffering. They think of outright physical suffering. And then they think, I'm not suffering. Rich people aren't suffering. Then they start thinking, well, happiness is just if everybody gets what they want. Everybody has food and clothing and shelter and medicine and friends and success and vacation homes and this and that. And they begin to think that's all that's needed for happiness and for the alleviation of suffering. And that's not it. Mm-hmm. So even though here at the Abbey, as you've noticed, each night we make dedication prayers for people who have asked us to pray for them or to pray for people who are near and dear to them. And usually those people ask us to pray for other people or for themselves when they're having outright physical suffering. So we do that. But we shouldn't limit our prayers to just wishing them to overcome their bad health or their marriage problems or their, lost job or whatever. We should really think, may they be free of all three types of dukkha. Yeah, may they be free of rebirth in cyclic existence. Because the fact of the matter is, until they're free of rebirth in cyclic existence, they may stop one type of outright suffering, but another one is going to follow very soon thereafter. Yeah. I remember my teacher wrote to me one time. I wonder, I might still have the letter somewhere. But he was saying that Mother Teresa alleviates so much suffering of sentient beings. And he said, and it's wonderful, but what you're doing by practicing Dharma is much more profound. Because when you practice the Dharma and you can overcome the afflictions, when we can do that, then our ability to really be a benefit to other living beings increases gazillion-fold. Okay? Because we all know that you can stop somebody's immediate suffering, but soon something's going to happen again, and they're going to have some other problem. If we can teach living beings how to overcome their own ignorance, how to deal with their afflictions, if we can teach them the difference between virtue and non-virtue, so that they can create the causes of happiness and avoid the causes of suffering, then we can actually do something that is going to have a longer lasting beneficial effect. Giving them food is good, but if they don't overcome miserliness and if they don't stop stealing, they're just going to create the causes for more famine and more lack of food. If we can teach them how to work with karma, if we can teach them how to work with the mind, then we're giving a gift that can actually lead them to ultimate freedom, ultimate happiness. But to be able to teach them that, we have to do it. Yeah, we have to do it ourselves and master it ourselves. It's not just a case of sitting back and telling everybody else, oh, this is virtue, this is non-virtue, this is the meaning of emptiness, blah, blah, blah. But meanwhile, our own mind is a mess. It's like we have to really change our own mind. Yeah. And so that's where, we really get into generating bodhicitta and why generating bodhicitta is so important. Okay? Because unless we change our own mind, how are we going to be able to lead other beings to liberation and enlightenment through our own experience? We don't have any experience. We'll just have a bunch of words. So words are good to start with, but we've got to go deeper. Okay? So that's why we generate bodhicitta. Okay? So you see, with this whole thing of compassion, the alleviation of dukkha, we really have to think very deeply, what is dukkha? Yeah. So if we look at the first level of dukkha, the painful things, what's the cause of those outright painful events in our lives? What kind of karma? Non-virtuous karma, unwholesome karma, okay? The 10 destructive actions. Those are the cause of the first kind of dukkha. The second kind of dukkha, the happiness that doesn't endure, that is in the nature of being unsatisfactory. What causes it? Huh? Yeah, our tainted virtuous actions. We're doing virtue, but our mind, it is tainted by ignorance. So we're still misapprehending things, even though we're doing actions that are virtuous. Okay. The third kind of dukkha, the pervasive dukkha of conditioning, what's its cause? Ignorance. Ignorance is the root. Okay? So if we want to, wish that beings be free of the cause of that suffering. We want them to be ignorant, to be free of ignorance. And what do they need to do to be free of ignorance? Realize the emptiness of inherent existence. Generate the wisdom that realizes how things actually exist. Okay? So do you see with each of the three kinds of dukkha, each has its own type of cause, and each has its own type of antidote, to counteract it. The wisdom that realizes reality is the ultimate antidote, because if we have that, it cuts off all three kinds of dukkha. Because if you eliminate the third kind, you can't have the first and second. So that's what we want to go for. If we eliminate the third kind of dukkha, we can't have the first or second. And what eliminates the third kind of dukkha is the wisdom that realizes the emptiness of true existence. Because the emptiness of true existence is the actual nature of reality. It's the actual mode of existence of things. That is totally the opposite. That wisdom perceives totally the opposite of what our ignorance perceives. Yeah?
Do these correlate to the three principal aspects of the path?
No.
The antidotes? No.
No, not especially. Mm-mm. Well, no, not really. Yeah. Yeah. Because actually renunciation includes not just renouncing negative actions, but all of samsara. Okay? Okay, yeah.
I don't know, I was going to say, I had a pretty big wow moment when you're talking about the gross mind that apprehends somebody being a jerk, because they've gotten to a point on physics, and I'm not sure what it's called. I think it might be the Heisenberg uncertainty principle, whereby the tiniest of objects are going to behave differently when there's an observer observing them versus when they're not observing.
Yeah.
And so light will act as a particle, or it will act as a wave, depending on who's observing it. And so, I mean, if you really think about that, I mean, because of our consciousness apprehending the external world, I mean, we're directly involved in making our own reality. And so when you think of it like that, if you then take all that mental chatter of labeling people jerks here and, clowns there or whatever, and you switch that around, of course, I mean, that whole principle of physics should give you, well, it gives me like this big impetus to really do that, because you can do it. And it's been basically experimentally verified at the tiniest microscopic level. And then what makes it even more remarkable is that, of course, the Buddha did this 2,500 years ago.
Yeah. Okay, so let's review what we talked about. Yeah, we talked about compassion, which is wanting sentient beings, which includes ourselves. It's not just others, it includes ourselves, to be free of dukkha and its causes. Okay? And there's three kinds of dukkha: the dukkha of pain, the dukkha of change, and then the pervasive dukkha of conditioning, meaning conditioning by ignorance, afflictions, and karma. Then we talked about what the causes of those three kinds of dukkha are, because if we want sentient beings to be free of dukkha and its causes, we better know what the causes are. And we better know what the antidotes are. So we talked about the antidotes for those three kinds of dukkha as well. Okay? And then we really talked about how difficult it is to recognize the different kinds of dukkha and who recognizes each of the three kinds. Actually, it's the Aryas who recognize the third kind. Yeah. The Aryas are the people just before, who are just who you can understand the third kind of dukkha before you become an Arya. Yeah, but it's, it has to be somebody who's seriously practicing. Okay, so let's do some meditation now.